in the early days, I tried to make my visuals fun or engaging or have lots of information there that my students would enjoy. And what happened was it would distract from the message of the learning, because I wasn't using visuals intentionally. I was using them because I thought I had to. We use visuals naturally, right? Whether we like it or not. So we change the expression on our faces, we change our body language, we use our hands. If we're in the classroom, we might have a whiteboard. You know, I was the eldest of 4. I was one of the older cousins, and I've got about 36 cousins. I'm going to reference my own learning journey a little bit here. So I have ADHD, and I was unaware that I had ADHD. And the way that it impacts me is that I struggle with processing information in the same way that other people do, right? But there was never, ever anything in my training about creating a pause, right? Just a pause to process.
Welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast. I'm your host, Ludo Miller, and I'll be interviewing tutors and thought leaders from across the tutoring landscape to inspire, inform, and motivate you to become the best tutor you can be. The Qualified Tutor community is a safe and supportive space for tutors who love to learn and grow. We offer training, resources, ideas, and a chance to connect with like-minded tutors. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast, and welcome to Colette Stevenson. Colette's mission is clear. She's committed to helping educators build their service and therefore increase learning through the power of visuals and graphics. Whether as a TESL teacher, a graphics course writer and facilitator, a designer, a social media coach, Colette has dedicated her life to educating and assisting others. There are honestly 20 different topics we could discuss today, but we're going to keep it to a few certain areas that mean the most to Colette and which will be really kind of most use to tutors. So today we'll be discussing the importance of graphics for tutors, what it really means to give space to learners, and some of the more kind of common misconceptions about graphics, visuals, and Instagram. So welcome, Colette. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Ludo. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm very excited today. A little bit nervous too. I've got to try and keep my answers neat and tidy.
Precisely. That's my role. It's just to make sure that there's not a kind of 20-minute answer, Colette, because I know that could happen.
Yes, it could. Yeah.
So we'd love to start with, just as I'm talking, Colette, we've just been talking about this. The most incredible thunderstorm has just begun. So there's quite a kind of atmospheric feeling to this, even if I'm sitting in my living room here. But Colette, we'd love to start with this question. And I know that you've got so much that you could talk about with this, but what is your why as an educator, Colette?
Right. Yeah, that's a huge, huge question. My biggest why as an educator is probably learning. It sounds quite trite when I say it like that, but what I mean is I'm passionate about learning for myself, and I'm passionate about other people learning for themselves, whether it's the children that I teach or the educators that I work with. And I felt quite passionately many years ago when I first went into education, where I found perhaps some of my older mentors or people with more experience were promoting the concept of teaching and managing the classroom. And perhaps it was a case of imposter syndrome or something, but I felt like I wasn't in a place to teach. I felt I was in a place to help people learn. And I know that that might just be semantics, but it was something that I felt quite passionately about, that I didn't want to stand there and impart knowledge or just teach. I wanted to create space for learning, and I wanted to facilitate learning, not just for my students or the people I was working with, but also for myself, because I think that teaching and education is a collaboration and a relationship.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important part of understanding why we educate and why we help out with students, is to build that relationship. And really, we know that that's what facilitates the best learning practices. So thank you for that. I think what we'd love to know a little bit more about now is kind of the why and the how of how you've come to help out kind of these child-centered brands in the work that you do, which is obviously as a designer, a graphic creator, a visual creator. How have you come to be where you are kind of today?
Oh, how long have you got? I mean, basically, I've always loved working with kids. Kids has always been my thing, I suppose. I was the eldest of 4. I was one of the older cousins, and I've got about 36 cousins. So I've spent a lot of time around children. I did a lot of babysitting. I did assistant teaching. I did lots of work around children. And when I moved to Japan to become an ESL teacher, I kind of fell into working with children more than working with adults, because I just loved it. And I loved the relationship that I had with kids. I loved being around childhood. I loved the natural energy and passion for learning that children have. And I found that, so with the company that I worked with, forced teachers to work with kids who didn't want to work with kids. Right. So there were a lot of people who went out there to teach English more for the adventure. Right. This was in Japan, more for the adventure of living in Japan than for any passion for teaching or education, which, everybody's got their own journey. But then when the company I worked for said everybody had to teach kids, and a lot of people just weren't comfortable with that. One of my jobs was to train these teachers to teach children. And it became very uncomfortable because it stopped being about the education of children. The learning itself and the resources themselves stopped being about the children and started being more about generating an income for the company. I suppose really that set me off on a bit of a journey. I didn't notice it at the time, but it set me off on a journey to the point where a few years later, I started my own school, which was about the children and about making the learning very, very child-centered. I wanted the children to come into the classroom, and there would be a kind of open-ended activity, and they would have a chance to explore that activity, and the lesson would take its direction from the conversation that the children's had around that activity, and the learning would follow them rather than following my plan, if that makes sense. And it was experimental and fun, and it worked really well. And then as I moved on and I began to do coaching and consultation with other companies, I found that I struggled a lot with worksheets, right? I didn't like worksheets because they seemed to be designed to test children's knowledge rather than encourage learning, or rather to engage conversation, or rather to facilitate relationship building. So I had a big bee in my bonnet about worksheets and refused to teach them, and just went completely anti-worksheets, right? Before coming back around to realizing that worksheets themselves can have a lot of value if we think about them creatively or come at them from a completely different angle rather than sitting down at a table and completing the worksheet. So I became then very, very passionate. All my training around that time with educators was about making their classrooms child-centered, about making worksheets geared towards building those relationships and building communication with children, and making them interactive and repurposing them. So it's not just a complete the activity, done, move on to the next activity. And now, bizarrely, I've become a designer, because a lot of the work that I did, of course, led me to designing my own resources, led me to designing my own worksheets, my own storybooks, my own whatever it was. And I suppose resources and materials. And I started doing that for other educators. And now I help educators build their businesses online by helping them with their advertising even, But I'm very passionate about working with people who are committed to the child-centered experience, not just about imparting knowledge or forcing a curriculum down someone's throat.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we do as tutors, don't we? We respond, we react to the students' needs. We don't stick to the same session plan. We don't even stick to the session plan, most likely, because of all the other contextual factors that make up tutoring. You know, they're a bit tired at the start of the session, so we start with a game, or they need a little bit more help on something we did last week that we didn't realize they would need help on. So we go back to last week's kind of material, all that kind of thing. We don't kind of charge on with a curriculum like schools and teachers are compelled to do, because they need to move on with the
they
academic
have to
year.
move on. The system doesn't help teachers as much as it doesn't help students, I think. Could be another topic entirely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there we go. That's put that on the list of other topics that we've got, Colette. But you mentioned a lot in kind of the work that you do and the wonderful LinkedIn lives that you release that you can find. You can listen to Colette on LinkedIn if you just give her a little. I believe it's a connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Connect away. I accept all connections, actually.
Accept all connections. It's a like on Facebook. It's a follow on Twitter. It's a connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You've got to be careful with all these.
You do have to. Yeah, you do. Don't you?
Yeah. You don't want to be following someone on LinkedIn. We all know that's not possible. So, but what, a phrase that you mentioned a lot is this idea of giving space to learners. Now, some of our listeners will kind of have used this in their work, and some of them won't have. So. Do you mind just telling us a little bit more about what you mean by giving space to learners or to a learner?
Yes. I'm going to actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to reference my own learning journey a little bit here. So I have ADHD, and I was unaware that I had ADHD. And the way that it impacts me is that I struggle with processing information in the same way that other people do, right? Sometimes I just can't hear what people are saying, especially if I have to sit and look at them, right? For example, sometimes I'll process the information, but I don't actually register it until maybe a week or 2 weeks later. And a good example, which I never really understood until over the last 12 months, was that when I lived in Japan, I wasn't really processing the language to learn the language until I left Japan. And then everything that I'd heard, I would begin to understand the language. And I would go back after a holiday, and my Japanese had improved by not being around it. So that space away from learning actually helped me personally to process information that I was taking on board. And I think as an educator in the classroom, I often noticed that to a different scale and different degree with different students that I worked with, very often not doing an activity gave the children time to process what we were learning. So creating space in the classroom, just sometimes it would be a silence. So not just a question or like, okay, everybody, here's a question, and then you wait for the answer or have that beat. But it was about creating just a pause. So I'd have when I was learning teaching from other teachers, we'd learn about transitions and classroom management, and we'd learn about, giving instructions to students, like how they would process it. But there was never, ever anything in my training about creating a pause, right? Just a pause to process. And so I felt quite passionately about making space in the classroom where children were not obligated to do anything, right, other than what they needed to do. And these were just short, sharp lessons. It wasn't a whole day with students. But that also translated into my designs as well. So when I was creating a resource, I didn't want to jam pack it full of, stickers and clip art and words and lines and boxes and things, because it cluttered the information that was there for the children. And I wanted to take away all that distraction, perhaps because I have ADHD, take away all that distraction so that when children or when my students had the resource, they could see at a glance what was expected without having to read a ton of instructions, without having to figure out what they were supposed to do. They could see at a glance what they needed to do, and without me needing to explain it. And I think that was also enhanced by the fact that most of my students were non-native speakers of English. So I had to minimize how much instruction I gave or how many words they had to read. So all of that impacted the way that I then started producing my resources. And it translates into children who speak English as a first language as well. So did that answer your question?
No, try again.
Sorry.
No, more than enough, Colette. That was that was kind of a very visual way of describing giving space. Literally removing yourself from that space and allowing that to allowing yourself to absorb that slowly. That's a really powerful idea of how we progress and how we learn. Is not just kind of diving in 24/7 or the whole 100%. And I think that's an important thing for people to remember who are stressed by work or who are stressed by the work that they do in teaching others, is that sometimes taking a step back is just as helpful, really.
This summer, join us for the first ever Love Tutoring Festival, a celebration of tutoring in all its aspects. We invite you to bring all your experience and expertise to make this event the most exciting event to ever happen in the world of tutoring.
The festival, running from Monday the 28th of June to Friday the 2nd of July, is a rich and varied programme of free events, keynote presentations, workshops, live podcasts and practical demonstrations spread out over a whole week. And don't worry, everything will be recorded, so as long as you're enrolled, we'll give you access to any of the events that you miss later on. We're also offering a limited number of tickets for our famous CPD accredited workshops. If you purchase a ticket to any or all of these practical and engaging workshops, you'll also receive a certificate of completion after the event.
To register for the free pass and to grab your CPD tickets, go to qualifiedtutor.org/Love Tutoring Festival.
You were just touching a little bit there on, and maybe you were kind of just thinking about the next question already. I'm sure you've been tying in these answers so that they all link together.
Oh yeah, it's all pre-planned. I'm the best planner. Ask anyone.
but I guess you were just kind of considering something there about the importance of graphics for tutors and the importance of not overloading a page full of information, that kind of idea. So what if we just move slightly over from the tutor's point of view now, from the educator's point of view, why do they need to work with graphics? What are some of the reasons why having a visual as part of your educating is an important feature?
We use visuals naturally, right? Whether we like it or not. So we change the expression on our faces. We change our body language. We use our hands. If we're in the classroom, we might have a whiteboard. We use paper to scribble down notes. We might be using, if we're using Zoom to do a lesson, we might have the Zoom whiteboard. We might be sharing our screen. We use visuals naturally all the time as a way to impart knowledge. And we know that people learn in many different ways, whether it's visually or through audio or kinesthetically. We know that our learners learn in many different ways. And visuals is just one aspect of that whole process. And if you're using visuals, I think it helps your learners and ourselves to make sure that we're using those visuals purposely and choosing visuals that actually do enhance our teaching and the learning journey that we're trying to incorporate. Because I think what sometimes happens, and it's not for everyone, but what sometimes happens is that I think teachers or tutors will think, I need to have an activity that the child can fill out, or I need to show the child something, but we don't necessarily always, and I've been guilty of this myself. So, full disclosure, I've been on a journey to get to this point. So it's not like I became a teacher and was like, woohoo, I know how to make visuals. Of course I didn't. I had to learn all of this and I made a lot of mistakes. And I think for my own journey, and I can only speak about what I've learned myself, is that in the early days, I tried to make my visuals fun or engaging or have lots of information there that my students would enjoy. And what happened was it would distract from the message of the learning, because I wasn't using visuals intentionally. I was using them because I thought I had to. And I think there's much to be said as a tutor to knowing when to use a visual as much as why you're using a visual, and also when not to, right? So as much as I'm a graphic designer and I'm very passionate about making things look nice, and I really want people to be using things in a way that engages the kind of visual sense. I also think it's important to not use them, so that when you do use them, they have more impact. I think we can use visuals in our learning, not just to, show a concept. I mean, it's kind of different. Like if you're doing math, it's great to show, for example, fractions as Lego blocks, or because it just helps the student process it in a different way. But that same visual might not connect with all students. So you might need to find a different way and use a cake, right? So there's different ways to present that same information, and having a variety of information means that you're going to help deepen the understanding of that concept. So if you're only ever showing, like I was only ever shown a cake, right, split into 8 parts to show eighths as a kid. So, and that worked fine until you have to split things into like ninths. You can't cut a cake that way, not as a visual person anyway. So it's kind of understanding as well how that work is interpreted, and finding other ways to present things visually so that kids can get a really deep, I talk predominantly about kids, can get a really, really deep sense about the learning that they are gathering, but also creating visuals where children can fill in the gaps for themselves. I don't mean fill in the blanks, worksheets. I'm miming here because, but
It's time tutors had their own day. July the 2nd is World Tutors Day, a new global day celebrating tutors and the difference we make. Never before have tutors been as relied upon as this past year, in which tutors from all around the world have stepped in to support struggling students and parents. This is their chance to say thanks. There are lots of ways to get involved. Send your parents and students to worldtutorsday.org to leave a thank you note. Invite them to post a photo thanking you, the tutor, with the Thank Your Tutor hashtag. Or join the gratitude circles on the final day of the Love Tutoring Festival, when we'll be celebrating tutors and all we have to offer. July the 2nd is World Tutors Day.
I think it's really important for children to be able to see something, process it, and register it in their ways. And if we take that element of learning away from our students, or we don't use visuals intentionally, what we end up doing is cluttering that learning journey rather than enhancing it.
Yeah. I totally believe in the power of graphics and visuals. So I'm with you on that one, Colette. You'll see me nodding away here. And I agree, and I think it's important that other tutors at least are made aware of the power of using a kind of a secondary way of getting across the teaching that you're trying to do.
It can be anything. It could be like a puppet or it doesn't. We can get quite. We can use visuals in so many ways. It doesn't have to be all textbook pictures or photographs or worksheets or even, beautifully designed resources. It doesn't have to be visuals, can be anything that we see. Yeah.
And I think that's become perhaps probably even more important with online tutoring, because it's so important to keep a student focused online because it's so much easier to become distracted. When you're sitting next to a student, there's that natural human connection between two individuals that allows you to keep the kind of momentum going of the session. When their message pops up, or they realize that they can kind of half listen to you, but also, message their friends or play on a game, that kind of something becomes so much more important for the tutor to engage your student with a visual, because that's what they like seeing is, something visual, whether it's a game or a message or a photo on social media. What they like to see is a visual. So
so keeping on, especially with video tutoring, it's really to keep that kind of visual engagement. It is really powerful, really, really powerful. I mean, if you can change your background, I use a green screen quite a lot, but changing your background or doing unpredictable things just keeps those children engaged and keeps that connection very, very tight. So.
Yeah, I hope, listeners now are just beginning to think about ways that they can alter their online tutoring to include these kind of elements, because we've all experienced it online, whether you're a coach or a mentor or a tutor or a course facilitator. Anyone who's delivered any kind of teaching or coaching online will have experienced the loss of concentration of the attendees or the students or whoever it is. It happens the whole time. We can't help it. Even as a host or a facilitator yourself, you'll have experienced it. So I think your message is really clear and really enhanced in its importance at the moment, because it's even more essential to engage online. But let's turn to an exciting adventure that you have coming up, Colette, which is a new Instagram project that you are going to be leading for kind of from now for the foreseeable future. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project?
Yeah, it's a very strange project. So as a designer, I needed a way to showcase some of the things that I could do. And obviously I predominantly work with child-centered educators, and I made little cute characters and mascots and things, but I needed a way to showcase them and showcase how they could be used. And I figured, well, Instagram's a good place to do this because, it's visual and people go there and lots of educators are on there sharing tips and tricks, right? So obviously go where your audience is. So I went on Instagram, but my Instagram grid looked rubbish, right? And I'm like, I can't say that I do graphics and have a rubbish Instagram grid. And then I also struggled with the fact that, having ADHD, I don't tend to plan ahead, right? I'm not good at it. It's not my strength. And then if I do plan ahead, I get bored of the plan because I feel like I've already done it. So I have to move into another direction. So I needed a way to have a cohesive grid that showcased what I did, that I also didn't have to plan. So I created a system which gave me an infinitely scrolling poster, right, basically, on Instagram. So if you go onto it's Colette.branddesigner, you'll see the original journey there, where I basically explored different ways to present my work. And then I could just post sporadically. So when my phone died in I don't know when it was, August or September or something, I then had 3 months without a phone. But when I got my new phone, I could just pick up where I left off, and you can't see, it's seamless. It's just a completely seamless grid. Anyway, fast forward to a couple of months ago, I was doing a course on sales, and I was like, all right, I've got this grid and I think other people can benefit from it and I can help other people do this. And somebody there was like, oh, wow, that's great. I want to go into business with you. So I now have a business called PostGrid, which has got a lot of interest from people all over the place, actually. It's a little bit overwhelming, I'll be honest. And the idea is that we create now infinitely scrolling posters for people to grow their brands on Instagram. And there's so many things going on in the background and ideas that we haven't released yet, which I'm really excited about. In fact, I haven't even told my business partner. I had like a brilliant idea over the weekend. Can't tell you now either. Top secret.
First exclusive, exactly.
But got all these ideas for how to make it work. So it's basically a way you can do storytelling through it. You can engage through it. You can have like a pathway through it. You can create mazes on Instagram. There's so many things that you can do with this system that nobody's doing yet. So basically I've got this other business now on the side, which is very exciting.
That is very exciting, and it's another amazing way for people to stay in touch with what you're doing and to get involved with all these wonderful ideas that seem to come through in you, Colette. So we'll just keep waiting for next Monday to come around, because it seems over the weekend ideas come into your mind, and maybe we'll have a podcast every Monday with you, Colette. a brain dump of the new ideas.
I do need a brain dumpy, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'd love to hear kind of all the updates. So no, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive kind of journey through the different aspects of your kind of how you've come to work in the field that you do today, and what it means to you, kind of some aspects of your philosophy of working, and then a little look to the future as well, which is a really exciting development. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you were able to enjoy kind of talking about what you do.
I enjoyed it very much. I mean, as usual, I went off on tangents, but that's what I do.
They were fascinating tangents. You know, the tangents come in all shapes and sizes. But thank you very much for taking the time, Colette, to join us. If you'd like to find out more about Colette, what's the best way to contact you to find out more about what you do?
I should say Instagram, shouldn't I? I should say Instagram, but also LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and I connect quite freely with people on LinkedIn, and I respond to DMs on LinkedIn quite a lot. But I have multiple Instagram accounts. But if you're interested in my Instagram project, you can find me on PostGrid or Colette.branddesigner, or you can always find me on LinkedIn.
They'll all be in the show notes below, but just in case someone wants to do it right now, those are your ways of contacting Colette further. So I'd like to say thank you again, Colette. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org, or find it in the show notes below. We exist to connect, share, and learn with you, because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference. And of course, we can't forget, in the week starting Monday the 28th of June, the week of the Love Tutoring Festival, we will be recording 4 consecutive live late-night podcasts, starting with Send and Mental Health on the Monday, moving to running an agency on the Tuesday, being a professional tutor on the Wednesday, and being an NTP tutor on the Thursday. So those will go out live. We can't wait to record those podcasts with our wonderful guests, and for you to join in either live or to listen along afterwards. Those will be released on the Qualified Tutor podcast. So grab your tickets at qualifiedtutor.org/Love Tutoring Festival, and we'll see you all there.